Avatar, The Last Airbender has a second live-action adaptation after the 2010 movie that was from M. Night Shyamalan. That didn't work, so this is a second shot at it. And I just realized there's another Avatar over here. No connection, obviously. The plot follows pretty much the exact same structure of the first season of the animated series. Once again, it follows Aang, played by Gordon Cormier in this one, found in the ice by Katara and Sokka, played by Gyawendio and Ian Owsley, and eventually they go on a journey to restore the world's balance because Aang is the Avatar and he can stop the Fire Nation from total domination, but they're also being pursued by Prince Zuko, played by Dallas Liu, and his uncle, General Iroh, played by Paul Sun-hyung Lee, and they have to stop them as well and evade them as much as they can. I can't stress this enough, but this was being watched like a hawk by everybody who was a fan of the original animated series. Of course it was, because the first time that this was attempted, I already mentioned, it didn't really work out as well as it could have. And when you're going to do a second try, you always want to make sure that you get the best team possible, folks that know exactly how to do this in the most faithful way possible. And for a moment, that was the case, because the original showrunners of the animated series were involved. But in about 2020, they announced that they were no longer a part of it, which immediately set off some alarm bells, because they said creative decisions were being really overrun. It didn't seem like it was the thing that we wanted to work on anymore, so we're out of it. And now the show with a new showrunner is dropped, and it's been out for a couple of days now. I'm gonna go into some spoilers every now and then, although it does follow a lot of stuff from that first season. The animated series is one of the best TV shows of all time. It's obviously a very, very high bar to reach, and I just rewatched season 1 so that I can watch this version. I had to remember certain things because it's been years. And I will say right out the gate that when it comes to trying to recapture it better, this one definitely did it better than the movie. Was that a high bar? Not really, but it is a bar that was very easily crossed, even just in the first episode. There are elements of this that definitely feel like the original team did work some of that magic, and you do get to see a few of those glimmers. When it comes to the casting especially, there are some who are really, really good in this. I thought Gordon Cormier, who plays Aang, he was really good. I thought he really did the gradual growth of the character as it went on, which is in this season, fairly nicely. I say specifically that this season because we'll talk more about that aspect in a minute. Katara, played by Gyawendio, I hope I got that pronunciation right. I looked it up right before filming. She was also very good, similarly, and I thought Sokka, Ian Owsley, was also very solid. I think they captured their characters fairly nicely. I think the standouts, however, were Dallas Liu as Zuko and Paul Sun-hyung Lee as Iroh. I think they easily gave the best performances, and they get the best emotional moments as well. Some of those have been expanded upon from the original animated, especially in the first season, so you get a lot more with them in that sense, and I think that they both really did bring their A game over here. At times, it felt like whatever they were acting in was like a completely different thing. Like there was a much better direction or team involved in that than there was with some of the other moments of the season, which we'll get to some of more of that in a second. This was a pretty expensive show, and the visual effects are telling in that sense because they've definitely tried to make it look as visually terrific as possible. There are some moments that don't really manage to do that, like especially in the early half of the show. It definitely feels a little scattershot in a couple of moments, like the quality wise, like sometimes they look really good, sometimes not. But especially in the back half of the season, they really dialed it up, and especially the finale, it looks pretty spectacular. So some praise to that for sure. And I can actually say that for pretty much every single aspect of this, whether it be how it's written, whether it's direction, in terms of the performances. I feel like the second half of the season did a better job of it than the first half of the season did. It definitely has its share of growing pains. There are things that are going on that don't feel like they're fully into the season yet, or at least they don't feel like they're, confident enough in what's going on. And eventually, once you're past about episode 3 at least, and some parts of episode 4, then 5 to 8 definitely feel like a much more satisfying viewing than episodes 1 to 4 did. And that might also be because a lot of the changes that are made are pertaining to that first half of the season, because a lot of things have been pushed together into the narrative that they're telling, while a lot of omissions have been made as well. Something that I try to do on this channel is I don't try to do a lot of comparisons, because I try to judge adaptations as they are. I don't need a carbon copy of exactly what the animated show did, because then the argument becomes, why did you even do it? So I think the opportunity to try some new stuff is perfectly acceptable. And while that's not something that's a problem for me, I think over here it's the omissions from that original source material that I do feel like hinder a lot of things over here. And I feel like it takes away from a very major emotional core that the original series had, particularly when it comes to Aang. Now, I mentioned Aang over here is very good, but I think the one big mistake that happened is it decides to make his focus on saving the world come before his childish self. And I think one of the biggest problems is that the show originally balanced that really, really well. You had moments where, of course, things had to be taken seriously, and Aang has to do, what he has to in order to help take on the Fire Nation. But at the same time, he's also a kid. And there are moments where he's just playful and having fun with Katara and Sokka, and they're just doing silly things, which is totally fine. Those things are just as important as everything else. You have to remember, he's still a 12-year-old kid who was trapped in the ice for 100 years. And while the world got destroyed and so much of the Fire Nations, taking over things was happening during that time, when he does come out of the ice, that part of him is still there. In fact, I love the point, especially in the original series, when he first finds out he's the Avatar. There's a moment that really lands it super well. It's after he finds out, the monks tell him, well, you gotta start training because, threat is imminent. And he's like, what? I'm still a kid. I want to go play with my friends. When he goes over, though, the kids are like, well, you kind of have an unfair advantage over us now, so I don't know if you should play with us anymore. He gets really sad and he goes inside, and then Gyatso, another monk that he's been very close to, he's like, hey, I'm playing Pai's show, come on over, let's play. And they start having this game together, and he's laughing and he's having a good time, and then one of the other monks walks in and he's like, you should be focusing on his training. It's like, no, he's a kid. And I feel like that encapsulates it super well, is that you have to maintain that balance when you're adapting this character. That's not here. Here, the focus is, I have to save the world, and every decision is guided by that. And it's not even just a distraction thing. It's not like those funnier moments or those more playful moments are there just to take away from the seriousness of it. Even those things have lessons in them which are helpful to Aang later on. They impact his character, they impact other characters, and certain things like that, you need them. And the structural changes do affect some things which are also quite taking away from some of the show's stronger elements, which it's trying to do on its own. Speaking of creative decisions, one of the big changes that they made is giving a lot more to Fire Lord Ozai, played by Daniel Dae Kim, and his daughter Azula, played by Elizabeth Yu. I was surprised at how much both of them are in here, especially Azula, because she's in the final shot of season 1. She's not really in it until season 2. Now granted, structural changes have been made, and because these are 8 one-hour-long episodes, those 20 episodes of the first season, a lot of them have been merged together, and so you have to do some stuff that, adds to the storyline being told. And while much of Azula's storyline is also set up to season 2 that we'll probably get down the line, at the same time, it's also giving a lot more to Ozai, which I was a little surprised by given how little we get in terms of his build-up. Because in the first season, you don't really see him until much, much later. And I think the first time you really get any kind of glimpse of him is when you're hearing about Zuko's past and how it eventually led to him going on this journey to find the Avatar, which was essentially banishment. And when you get that arc, you go, oh, that's his father. And that's the first time you even hear him. That's Mark Hamill's voice. Here, Daniel Dae Kim as Ozai is there from the get-go. And while he's good in the show, he's good, I was just surprised by how much they gave him. Which, again, totally fine, but I do feel like some of that menace suddenly was, that mystery of that character was somewhat lost in there. And while I did say that I don't like to do a lot of comparisons to the original and compare it on its own terms, I feel like sometimes it's a little hard to do that because when you're following things as closely as, can be, those things do stick out. It also doesn't help that some of the best scenes which are in this series, a lot of them are directly taken from the animated series. There's a couple of additions that I did like, mostly when it comes to Zuko and Iroh. There's some stuff with the backstory about how they went on this journey that I thought, oh, that's emotional. That really hits you. There's a couple of beats with Katara and Sokka, which some things that they lose in the process in terms of their stories, they try to make up for it with a couple of flashbacks. Like you get a flashback to Katara losing her mother, which was very powerful. I thought they did that really, really well. There's also a moment where Sokka sees his dad again because he misses him so much. He's like, oh, I don't know when I'm going to see him again. And that painful memory of his dad expressing some disappointment in him. And all of those were also very effective. But there are crucial elements of that restructuring that mess up other stuff. For example, the Earth Kingdom stuff, Boomy, Jet, and the air bending kids with planes and stuff. You get all of that in one area. I was kind of surprised by that. It just made it feel very, very crammed, and it leads to, especially that first half, it leads to such a crammed storyline, and it doesn't feel like the emotional payoffs that could be are always as effective. And unfortunately, because of that, it leads to a first half which overall, not great, and it's very messy. The second half, like I said, is a little better. There's elements of it which are pretty much directly from the original. The finale is almost beat for beat the original finale. So if you remember that one, a lot of that stuff happens here too. It's a bit of an extended cut. You get a little bit more over here because, more money. And you're able to do some more stuff with visual effects. But that's really about it. And so when I was done watching this season, there were things I liked, there were things I didn't like as much. And it led to a story that overall I found to be a little scattered. And I don't think this is as good an adaptation as it could have been. I don't think it's awful. I don't think any part of it sucked. I don't think there's anything that's irredeemable, but I do think there are things that could have been stronger. And so overall, I was kind of left feeling like it's okay. Overall, I thought it was okay. I don't think it's bad. I do think it's significantly better than the movie, but that's not a super high bar, so make of that whatever you will. But I feel like I should have put that out there as well. I'm going to give Avatar: The Last Airbender Season 1 a B-. I'm hoping that they do similar to what the Halo show just did, where it's like, okay, we're going to take the best things from Season 1 going into Season 2, make it a little bit better, which I believe they've done in Halo Season 2, so hopefully it's a similar thing where they take the things that worked over here and make that more impactful with Season 2. So hopefully that happens. Otherwise, I guess we'll find out. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Look forward to more videos very, very soon. Let me know what you guys think of The Last Airbender new Netflix version. Did you guys enjoy it? Did you not enjoy it? Is there anything that you think could have been better? Let me know accordingly. As always, if you like this, please do subscribe. Thank you very much once again. And please enjoy the show.